Archaeologists in Jerusalem have discovered a series of mysterious underground rooms near where the second Jewish temple is believed to have stood about 2,000 years ago. The purpose of the chambers still unknown, though oil lamps and pots suggest some kind of domestic use.
The most sacred room in the temple. Hidden inside was the Ark of the Covenant, which contained the 10 Commandments God gave to Moses. Today, no one knows where the Ark is.
For centuries, the Temple Mount has been one of the most sacred and most disputed places on earth. Jews, Muslims, and Christians all believe it hides secrets buried deep beneath its ancient stones. This 35-acre platform in the heart of Jerusalem carries thousands of years of biblical and prophetic significance. But no one expected what scientists recently uncovered beneath its foundations, a discovery so powerful it could reshape history, faith, and even science itself. For months, the findings were kept hidden from the public. Now, the truth is coming to light. What they uncovered not only aligns with ancient writings, it's so astonishing it could leave you absolutely speechless. The Temple Mount, sacred ground through the ages, and the crown of Jerusalem's old city rising proudly from the hills. But there is one place that rises above all others, not in size, but in meaning. The Temple Mount. In Hebrew, it is called Har Habayit, and in Arabic, Haram al-Sharif. This ancient limestone platform is wrapped in legend, faith, and mystery. It remains one of the holiest and most contested sites on earth. For Jews, it is the holiest place in existence, the site where King Solomon built the first temple nearly 3,000 years ago. According to tradition, it held the Ark of the Covenant, guarded by golden cherubim and filled with the very presence of God. After the Babylonians destroyed it, the Second Temple rose, only to be torn down centuries later by the Romans in 70 CE. For Muslims, it is the noble sanctuary, the place where the Prophet Muhammad is believed to have ascended to heaven during his night journey. At its heart stands the Dome of the Rock, built in the 7th century, its golden crown still shining across Jerusalem. For a time, it was even the first direction of prayer, the Qibla, for early Islam. For Christians, the Temple Mount is sacred by proximity. It was the setting of key moments in the life of Jesus, most famously when he overturned the tables of money changers, declaring the temple courts a house of prayer instead of a den of thieves. Yet beyond the shrines we see today, this single hilltop carries a story far deeper than stone, faith, or memory, a story still unfolding beneath its ancient ground. It is a story written in buried layers of stone, secrets sealed away by centuries of war and worship. For generations, scientists have dreamed of peering beneath the Temple Mount. Over time, empire after empire left its mark here. The Persians, who allowed the Jews to rebuild, the Greeks, who desecrated the site, the Romans who raised the Second Temple, the Byzantines who built churches above it, the Umayyads who crowned it with the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Crusaders, the Ottomans, the British. Each power reshaped the mount, rebuilt its walls, and redefined its purpose. Yet through all the changes, one truth endured, that this ground was not only sacred but extraordinary. Not just a holy site, but a place where heaven and earth seemed to meet. In Jewish tradition, it was believed to be anchored by the Shekinah, the very presence of God, once resting inside the Holy of Holies, between the golden wings of the cherubim. That belief never disappeared. It lives on in prayers, in scripture, and in the reverence that still surrounds the Temple Mount today. And yet, despite its weight of history and faith, what lies beneath the mount remains a mystery. Political and religious tensions have long prevented excavations. Only a few limited digs, through nearby tunnels or unauthorized construction, have given fleeting glimpses below. But even those glimpses hint at something ancient waiting to be uncovered. That is, until the late 1990s, when a discovery changed everything. So what exactly was found beneath the forbidden ground? And why has no one ever been allowed to dig here? Digging beneath most ancient sites is straightforward. Bring the tools, secure the permits, and let the earth reveal its secrets. But the Temple Mount is different. Beneath this sacred plateau lies the heart of 3 world religions, and with it, a storm of politics, power, and faith so intense that even a single strike of a shovel could spark global outrage. Since the 1800s, explorers have been captivated by what might lie below. British military engineer Charles Warren was among the first to venture deep beneath the mount, squeezing through shafts, cisterns, and ancient tunnels under Jerusalem. What he discovered, chambers carved into bedrock, mysterious water channels, and strange voids, raised an even bigger question: what else lies hidden below? But Warren's reports came at a price. Religious leaders quickly shut the doors to further exploration. From that point on, digging directly beneath the Temple Mount became unthinkable. This was not just another archaeological site, it was sacred ground. Since then, no official full-scale excavation has ever been permitted under the Mount's platform. The reasons are as much spiritual as they are political. In Jewish tradition, the Temple Mount is the holiest place on earth. Somewhere beneath it lies the Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber of the ancient temple, where God's presence was believed to dwell. Entering that space unknowingly is strictly forbidden by Jewish law. That fear alone has kept generations of devout Jews from even setting foot on the plaza. For Muslims, the Mount holds the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam. To them, it is not just history, but living faith, making the idea of excavation unimaginably sensitive. For decades, the Islamic Waqf, an authority based in Jordan, has maintained full religious control over the Temple Mount, and they have guarded it fiercely. The delicate arrangement between Israel and the Waqf is so fragile that even the slightest action seen as a challenge to Muslim sovereignty can trigger riots, violence, or international fallout. That's why, even when archaeologists suspect great discoveries lie beneath, the ground remains untouched. As one archaeologist famously said, "Digging here isn't just about history, it's about war and peace." But in the late 1990s, something unexpected happened. During unauthorized renovations on the Mount, hundreds of truckloads of soil were dug up and dumped in the Kidron Valley, just outside the old city walls. In an instant, thousands of years of buried history were thrown away like rubble, with no documentation, no records, and no control. Most would have let that priceless soil vanish. But a small group of Israeli archaeologists saw something others missed: an opportunity. In 2004, they launched what became one of the most unusual archaeological projects ever attempted, the Temple Mount Sifting Project. Working out of a public park in East Jerusalem, teams of volunteers began carefully sifting through the soil, bucket by bucket, stone by stone, year after year. The results were staggering. More than 500,000 artifacts were recovered, offering a rare glimpse into 3,000 years of life on the Mount. Among them were coins from the time of King Herod, Crusader-era arrowheads, and intricate Islamic jewelry. This wasn't just rubble, it was history, accidentally smuggled out of the Temple Mount, and hidden among the broken fragments were traces of something far older, far more sacred. As researchers sifted through the soil, a pattern began to emerge. Artifacts connected to ritual purity, worship practices, and even tools once used in the temple's inner sanctum. But what shocked them most was the number of items from the First Temple period, an era many scholars had long dismissed as little more than legend. This wasn't just lost history. It was evidence. Evidence that beneath the Temple Mount, something extraordinary still waits. A secret the soil itself could barely keep buried. The Temple Mount Sifting Project had begun as a desperate rescue effort, an attempt to salvage what had been dumped and disregarded, but as the fragments were carefully cleaned, they began to tell a story. Piece by piece, they formed a breadcrumb trail leading straight into the heart of ancient worship. A chipped shard of pottery revealed painted designs dating back to the 8th century BCE, the First Temple era. Soon after came fragments of oil lamps, charred animal bones, and pieces of ceremonial vessels. Ordinary finds at first glance, until something far less ordinary appeared. A hardened lump of clay, flattened and cracked with age, caught the eye of a researcher. It turned out to be a bulla, a clay seal impression once used to secure official scrolls. Under magnification, the ancient Paleo-Hebrew letters came into focus. The inscription read, Ga-al-Yahu, son of Immer. The name was familiar. In the book of Jeremiah, the family of Immer is described as a priestly household active in the First Temple. This wasn't myth. This was confirmation that a real priest from a real lineage once lived and served here. And it wasn't the only one. More bullae followed, some inscribed with names and titles that matched biblical records. Others carried symbols, menorahs, temple gates, priestly garments. Their dating was authentic, their script genuine. Slowly it became clear, these weren't just scattered objects. They were the surviving fragments of a priestly bureaucracy that had once operated on this very site. Among the most delicate finds was a carved ivory comb, its teeth still intact despite the centuries. Along its edge, archaeologists found what is now considered one of the earliest known complete sentences in Canaanite script. The inscription referenced personal hygiene, perhaps even ritual purity. A simple, everyday object, yet sacred because of where it was found. Then came tools tied even more directly to worship. A small bronze incense shovel, still coated with the blackened residue of ancient aromatic blends once burned in offerings. Nearby, finely crafted jewelry emerged, pieces that may have belonged to temple workers or worshippers, perhaps lost in a moment of panic, war, or exile. Mixed among the first temple relics were artifacts from the Roman, Byzantine, and Islamic periods, clear proof that the Temple Mount remained sacred across generations, faiths, and empires. But it was the deepest, oldest layers that drew the most intrigue. For years, some scholars and political voices claimed there was no solid evidence that Solomon's temple had ever existed. Yet, piece by piece, the soil began to tell a different story. These finds weren't just old, they were precise. They lined up too closely with biblical descriptions of priestly duties, sacred rituals, and temple service to be dismissed. Every artifact pulled from the dirt was another crack in the wall of doubt. Another sign that this place, long treated by skeptics as nothing more than faith and legend, was real, tangible, and active. And as archaeologists studied the distribution of these finds, a pattern appeared. The artifacts weren't scattered randomly. Many clustered in one section of the debris, an area that seemed connected to something deeper, perhaps collapsed chambers or hidden passageways sealed off centuries ago. The evidence pointed toward forgotten rooms that hadn't been entered in more than 1,000 years. Between 2021 and 2024, a new team of researchers set out to test this theory. They combined cutting-edge technology with long-overlooked maps from the British Mandate era, focusing on the southern edge of the Temple Mount near the Western Wall. For generations, travelers, Ottoman officials, and even British explorers had whispered about strange underground voids here, chambers, staircases, and hollow spaces. But without proof, the stories faded into rumor. Then, in 2023, the breakthrough came. Because digging was forbidden, scientists turned to advanced tools. Using ground-penetrating radar, the same technology that has revealed hidden chambers in Egypt's pyramids, they scanned beneath the bedrock. What they found stunned them: irregular shapes, straight edges, and geometric patterns where nature should have left only solid stone. The scans revealed sealed subterranean chambers buried beneath centuries of construction and collapse. To confirm, the team compared their radar results with hand-drawn maps made in the early 1900s by British officers, who had briefly explored parts of the Mount during the final years of Ottoman rule. The outlines matched. The same corridors, the same blocked staircases, the same suspicious voids. It was no longer rumor, it was real. The next step was taken with extreme caution. Excavations near the Western Wall tunnels, just outside the official boundaries of the Mount, were legally permitted and already underway. As workers carefully cleared the debris of an old Herodian structure, they stumbled upon something unexpected: a partially buried staircase carved directly into the limestone. The staircase led downward into a forgotten antechamber. Inside, it felt as though time had stood still. On the upper walls were faint Byzantine-era carvings, crosses, niche alcoves, and weathered inscriptions. Clearly, this chamber had once served as a Christian place of worship, likely in the 4th or 5th century CE. But what lay beneath the floor was far more compelling. Just a few inches deeper, researchers struck a second foundation, and this one was much older. The base was built from enormous ashlar blocks, finely cut and stacked with a precision rarely seen after the First Temple period. The craftsmanship mirrored the same engineering techniques found at Solomon's Gate in Megiddo, an unmistakable hallmark of ancient Israelite construction. That discovery changed everything. This wasn't simply a Byzantine chapel. It was a later structure built directly on top of something far more ancient, something long forgotten. Stratigraphy and residue analysis confirmed it. This lower foundation predated Herod's temple renovations by centuries. And its placement, tucked beneath the mount and aligned with biblical descriptions of sacred zones, hinted at a very specific purpose. Then came the most chilling discovery: a secondary staircase, half collapsed and choked with debris, trailing deeper into the rock. It had been deliberately sealed, not by natural disaster, not by decay, but by human hands. Someone, long ago, had wanted this passage closed forever, as though locking away a door that must never be opened. What were they trying to protect or conceal? The chamber's location, its architecture, and its alignment with ancient texts all pointed toward one possibility. This may have once been part of the inner sanctuary, or even a passage leading toward it. But the team wasn't ready to confirm such a claim. Not yet. They needed more proof. And that proof came not in the stones, but in what flowed beneath them, a water system that shouldn't exist. By this point, researchers had enough evidence to show that something sacred and ancient once stood on this mount. But what came next didn't speak of ritual objects or sealed chambers. It revealed something deeper: design. While surveying the ground beneath the southern edge of the Temple Mount, scientists detected a series of interconnected voids. These weren't burial chambers or storage pits. They were curved, precisely cut, and coated with a strange, waterproof plaster. As they mapped the system, a pattern began to emerge. What they had uncovered was a vast underground network of cisterns, channels, and aqueducts carved directly into the bedrock. It shouldn't have been there. And when they tested the mineral residue around the plaster, the results left the team stunned. These cisterns weren't Herodian or Roman. Their dating went much further back, to the First Temple period, around the 8th to 9th century BCE. But the real shock wasn't their age, it was their sophistication. The entire system revealed advanced hydrological planning centuries ahead of its time. It was engineered to regulate flow, balance water pressure, and store vast amounts of water in a region that is dry for most of the year. Some channels were narrow feeding tunnels, designed to guide runoff into reservoirs in a way that kept the water fresh and prevented stagnation. Others had carefully placed overflow ducts, redirecting excess water into secondary chambers, ensuring there was always supply without the risk of flooding. This wasn't just a water system, it was sacred infrastructure. When archaeologists mapped the cisterns, they aligned perfectly with biblical descriptions in the Book of Chronicles, pointing to preparations made by King Hezekiah and earlier kings for temple rituals. One massive basin stood out. Lined with ash and organic residue, it sat exactly where early Hebrew texts placed the altar of sacrifice. It hinted at daily priestly routines, ritual washings, purification, offerings, revealing a system far more advanced than scholars ever imagined. This wasn't primitive religion. It was precision, a holy machine designed with mathematical care. Following the ancient channels deeper, the team reached a sealed stone threshold. Beyond it lay a small chamber carved into bedrock. At its center, a shallow stone basin, half buried in ash. Around it, incense, offering fragments, and First Temple oil lamps, deliberately sealed away. And then came the haunting detail, words etched into the basin in Paleo-Hebrew: "He who dwells here, his spirit never leaves." The message aligned perfectly with descriptions of the Holy of Holies, the most sacred space of the First Temple, believed to be the dwelling of the Shekinah, God's presence. For the first time, objects from that space had been found, datable, physical, undeniable. For the first time, archaeologists held tangible, datable evidence of the most sacred zone beneath the Temple Mount, proof that faith had once been carved into stone. The basin, the ash, the offerings, all testified this was where the Israelites believed the Shekinah, the divine presence, had dwelled. The discovery stunned scientists, silenced religious leaders, and even gave skeptics pause. A spiritual reality had crossed into the physical world, but as news leaked, Reactions grew divided. Some Christians hailed it as a sign of prophecy fulfilled. Many Jewish leaders urged caution, even mourning. Entering the Shekinah's space without ritual preparation was a grave transgression. And authorities, wary of igniting unrest, kept official announcements vague. Behind the scenes, though, a race had begun. Archaeologists are pushing for non-invasive scans like muon imaging, the same technology used to probe Egypt's pyramids, to detect more hidden chambers. Meanwhile, scholars are revisiting ancient texts once dismissed as myth, now forced to consider them as historical maps of real sacred spaces. The line between faith and fact has never been thinner. The site, once too controversial to explore, may now hold the most important religious discovery of the century. And it's not just about proving an old story, but about seeing how ancient people built their world around belief, carving sacredness into stone, water, and space. What happens next is uncertain. Politics make access fragile, but one thing is clear: we've glimpsed something real, hidden for thousands of years, once believed to be the very center of the world. For the first time, we're not just looking at the Temple Mount from above, we're looking at it from within. What do you think about this discovery? Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.